Liberty Nation. Truth is making a comeback.
Hi, this is Tim Donner with LNTV, joined by LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor Scott Cosenza. And Scott, I bet you've got a big story for us from the Supreme Court.
That's right, Tim. On Monday, the United States Supreme Court ruled that gambling, sports wagering, was legal. They granted a New Jersey petition to strike down a federal law, and that federal law had said that legislatures and state governments were not permitted to legalize sports gambling. And by striking it down, that opened the path for any state that wished to allow it legally, like Nevada does now, the only state which currently allows for sports wagering.
Was this a straightforward decision? Now all sports wagering is legal everywhere, or is this a limited decision? And how many states are projected to, shall we say, take up the Supreme Court on the idea that they can now legalize sports gambling in their states?
Tim, the decision doesn't explicitly allow any particular type of wagering. It just removes the federal prohibition that was in place that prevented states from legally implementing gambling. So this is now up to the states. You know, in England and in other countries, people wager on all sorts of things that are kind of a little bit wacky. So we're going to see potentially in some states anyway, wagering in all sorts of areas. Now, to the second question, I think that we're likely to see this sprout up very quickly in states that already have a track record and history with casino gambling, because those facilities, both the physical facilities and the bureaucratic facilities and infrastructure, already exist for, as you may imagine, this will be an activity that is highly regulated. So I think that in New Jersey, they'll be ready to go very quickly, probably before the start of the NFL season, which, for those who don't know, is just fantastically wildly bet. People bet so much money on football games, it's unbelievable. And then I also would expect that we'll see other states like our neighboring West Virginia, Tim, which has casinos and infrastructures, and many of those states that do have casinos, they'll be ready to go first. And then, of course, as the other states see how much tax revenue the legalizers get, it'll be tempting for them to do so as well. So that's what I would predict.
So, Scott, this decision by the Supreme Court reverses a ruling from 1992. Why now? Just because New Jersey got a case that was able to ascend all the way to the Supreme Court?
Well, when Congress passed the law in 92, the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, I think it's called, it carved out some exceptions, notably for Nevada and also for New Jersey, if New Jersey wished to enact sports wagering. They had, under that law, a year to do it, and basically they didn't get the job done under that in that year. They declined to authorize legal sports wagering in 1992 or a year after. 10 years later, in 2012, I think the law passed, or 11 it passed, and 12 is when Christie signed it. They did decide they wished to, like Nevada, offer legal sports wagering. But under the terms of the 1992 statute, they weren't able to because they didn't do it in time. So they argued that this was impermissible, that the 10th Amendment anti-commandeering clause prevented this law. And that clause, Tim, states that Congress is not able to commandeer a state legislature and have them do their bidding, whether it's to pass a specific law or to not pass a specific law. Now, this has nothing to do with federal law superseding state and local law. That's not the question. The question is, can the federal government mandate that the legislators in Trenton not vote or produce a certain bit of legislation? And the Supreme Court said in this instance that that's impermissible. And because that's impermissible, there is no general federal prohibition on sports wagering. States are allowed to have that be legal. And so that's the current state of the law as we see it.
Is this a useful and important application of the 10th Amendment? Does it strengthen the 10th Amendment to the Constitution?
Tim, I think it does strengthen the 10th Amendment. The anti-commandeering provision in the 10th Amendment, I don't think was at issue. What was at issue is what we're going to put into that bucket. And the leftists on the court, namely Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sonia Sotomayor, and a little bit of Justice Breyer, who concurred in part and dissented in part from this decision, they would like to see fewer items be placed in that bucket because it's a check on federal power. Meanwhile, the sort of libertarians, the Gorsuches and the Thomases, would put more things into that bucket. And so to the extent that more can go in there, Tim, I think it's a win for liberty and for those of us who think that the Congress already governs far outside its proper grant of authority in Article 1.
Well, I'm going to roll the dice here, Scott, and say that this is a victory for the Constitution. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Tim.
That's Scott Cosenza, LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor. You can read his brilliant and ongoing legal analysis on our site, LibertyNation.com. I'm Tim Donner, and this is LNTV.
Liberty Nation. News and commentary, minus the propaganda. LibertyNation.com.